So then that first grade group goes to second grade, and then you have another first grade group. And then for second grade goes, and so on. So that's how the students move through the program. So those students are together, which was really one of the disadvantages they talked about. Because those same students, minus one or two, there is criteria. Not necessarily criteria. In their district, anyone can be admitted. As long as you followed the protocol, you can be into that, you can take that, be part of the immersion program. But it isn't successful for everyone, so there are students who leave that program, which leaves space for other students.
So I guess my thing is to do all of this to only benefit 25 kids every, each graduating year basically throughout 7 elementary schools just seems like there should be a better way to do it so that more kids would benefit from it. And what if we made one whole grade level over time? Obviously we'd have to do this little by little, but what if we made an entire, pick second grade. What if you made second grade the Spanish speaking grade, and then everyone benefits from a year of that? I got to experience in Head Start, kids that came into the Head Start program didn't speak a word of English. They only spoke Spanish. By the end of that year, they were completely fluent in English. I mean, it's amazing. And so in 1 year, you can make a huge difference, and every kid could benefit from that. So what about every year adding a few more until we have an entire grade level, and then it benefits everyone? And then you have collaboration. Rather than just being one teacher kind of writing solo at each grade level, you'd have all of that grade level of teachers being able to do that.
So you are suggesting that it would just be one grade level. This program really is, I start in first grade, but I go all the way up to 5th grade, and I get it every year. You're saying expanded to all second graders and everybody gets it 1 year, right? So you're talking about two different things then, in terms of you want advantage for a year for everyone rather than the advantages for the groups of students who go all through 5 years.
Right, because then it only benefits a small portion of your student body. Not everyone's getting, and you're dealing with a lottery, and everyone, some parents are going to be saying, well, how come this person's kid gets to go through that and my kid doesn't? Or maybe parents don't want to make that commitment of the entire elementary, but say, for 1 year that would be great for my kid to get exposed to that and be able to pick up that language, and they'll retain that. I mean, these kids are sponges. They'll retain that for 1 year. And then if you had something like when you're talking about an exploratory, maybe that's like a refresher for the other grade levels then, that you have that special every year, and that helps you kind of sustain what you've learned each year going forward, because you have a semester of that every year.
Do you have any?
Well, the only consideration with that is that every, say, second grade teacher would have to be a Spanish-speaking teacher. That's the only, throughout the district, so that's the only staffing concern.
Right, so what if, say we have 9 teachers retire this year from the elementary level, we hire 9 new Spanish-speaking ones and put them all in the same grade level throughout each of the buildings, and as people retire each year, we start to hire Spanish-speaking teachers until we fill up that 1 grade level.
No, I mean, that's a possibility. I'm just bringing in that as an issue, that's your one
Yes,
issue with that.
Yeah, thank you. We had talked about that then. We would need 21 Spanish-speaking teachers, and I will just tell you, just in terms of hiring teachers, we had a lot of trouble hiring middle school Spanish teachers last year. But I certainly appreciate the comment, and certainly, if that's what the board wants to discuss, but hiring, staffing that would be quite the challenge.
Well, and I think there's a couple of schools that don't even have 3 second grades. I think West Rock Hill, I think they only have 2 second grades, and I don't know what other buildings only have 2 second grades.
It fluctuates.
Right.
That's true.
So
It just does.
You won't know from here to here.
Right. Thank you.
I just have a quick question. So the ones, so you're saying just be like one class, and that would be following, so when the kids start school, so kindergarten or first grade, and they would just follow them up through the whole program to 5th grade, correct? And it's just that one class in that building?
Each year. So you would start out with the first grade class, and then when that class moves to second, you have another first grade class, and then so on and so on. So it's not just one group. Do you know what I mean? Like first, until you have 1 through 5
One class.
populated. 1 class per year until you're at 1 through 5. And then we would just continue with that process. Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Go ahead.
so for this, or maybe I guess we talk about it at the end, what we need to do to move forward with this, or with each piece. Can you tell us that, I guess, at the end, what the next steps are for everything?
Yes, at the summary.
Okay.
Thank you. The question about counseling as a special, that actually was called counseling as a special for some of the reasons that Mr. Smith was talking about, but also we were examining our new responsibilities from the state with college and career readiness. And was there a way, should there have been consideration on making guidance counseling as a special because of now the responsibilities that school districts have for presenting data, indicating that first, third, fifth, 3, 5, 8, this year's third, fifth, and 8, or no, 5, 8, and 11 have completed 3 pieces of work submitted on college and career readiness. That's why we had the discussion. Should we be doing that? What would it look like? And back and forth we went, to the benefits and the disadvantages, and the disadvantages far outweighed that. So we will not be considering counseling as a special. That's pretty much the bottom line, just based on what Matt Smith told you to. Does anyone else have any questions or concerns about counseling? Do you want any more questions there? So we talked about, on slide 22, the advantages with the defined schedule and the guidance office being able to have lesson plans to meet the needs of our students. And we all understand the value of counseling, especially with our students who struggle. Okay, so that leads us to STEM as a special. So like with the middle school scheduling committee, we didn't really have that in mind when we started, as we didn't have STEM in mind when we started the middle school scheduling. That kind of was a birth out of that. And so was STEM, because we talked about really how can we make the program at the elementary level the best it can be for our students. And the more we had conversation, the more we talked about award-winning high school STEM, the powerful lessons and experiences our middle school students are experiencing. And just across the state of Pennsylvania, nationally, globally, the impact of STEM education and what it has on our students and how we best can prepare them. So this also was a focus group that got very passionate. And I think we've talked a lot about STEM, we talked a lot about 21st century learning on the board. There's information on the slides. That's slide 23. If you go to slide 24, ESD standards for students. I am a digital age learner. What is happening at elementary schools now with STEM is inconsistent. It's great. I mean, you can go into some classes and you see all different kinds of things going on with coding and such. What we know for sure is that needs to be consistent across all elementary schools. So we'd like to create that semester course for elementary schools. We're talking about ISTE as the digital age learner. We're talking about the design process, as we talk about in middle school and high school, coding. We're talking about growth mindset. We're talking about failure and what that means and how we grow from that. And we're really talking about creativity, computational thinking, innovation. You see that there, a global collaborator. And how wonderful to marry the STEM with the world language. So you're building global citizens and digital citizens. So we have very passionate teachers who would be, very interested in becoming part of this particular program and write that curriculum. That's why we're saying with the world language and the STEM, we actually could have that curriculum written over the summer and we could implement that in the fall. There's a lot of work that's already been done and continues to be done, and we have tech integrators who are just phenomenal, and they come back and talk to me about all the things that they're seeing, and I'll go out to see classrooms, and then what really impacted me most, and I want to share that with all of you, is that I see it inconsistently. And it's just not part of the curriculum. So if you can do that in your classrooms, as Ken Everman will come up here and talk about, we just need to make sure that we have that for all students. And as I'm sure we are all aware that Governor Wolf supports STEM education. There are grant monies out there that we keep trying to get, and hopefully there'll be more money to help support programs across the state, and that hopefully Pennridge can benefit from that. These are districts locally who already have a STEM program in their elementary schools. CB has had one, Upper Perk, Wilson School District, Governor Mifflin, Schuylkill Valley. And we really are, in Bucks County, considered leaders in STEM. I mean, I go to a lot of county meetings. We are considered leaders. It just makes sense for us to make sure that we start with our earliest learners and bring them through. This would be, this is rough estimate of costs and some of the things that we would like to do for coding and the Ozobots and the Spiros. So that's a rough estimate. It would be about approximately that. We could start there. And we would use the iPads that are already at the school because you can't run a couple of these without iPads. So we would have to use the iPads to start with there to start that program. But we wanted to give you an idea of some of the costs that would be associated with the STEM program, especially with coding. Okay.
And then, aren't there, did you talk about the staffing? Is that?
I was going to do, this would be opposite world language, so it would be 2 teachers for STEM, 2 teachers for world language, and they would run opposite each other.
Right, but so it would be 1 day per cycle for half a year?
Yes,
1 day per week.
that's correct. Yes.
Questions on the board?
I just have one quick question. When we developed the STEM program at the middle school, we had to redo curriculum at the high school because then our kids already knew a lot of what they would have been learning in high school. So is that going to happen then if we start this particular one? Are we then going to have to redo STEM middle through high school because they'll already have this from elementary school? So is that going to be the plan to kind of revamp those as those kids kind of move up into the middle school?
And that's a great question. Initially, no. We were already looking at the Spiros. There's part of the 7th grade half year, the semester course STEM, that we would like to move down and start earlier. Eventually, right now, we just want to get the experiences going, see what we, developmentally, what's appropriate for elementary school students. Certainly develop coding skills, no question about that. That will have an impact for more sophisticated learning in the middle school for sure, and we want that in high school. Initially, I don't expect any impact right away with the middle school or the high school. Ultimately, I would imagine there is going to be an impact. At least I hope so.
Going back to this immersion program, and we're going to possibly have a school that would be assigned for this program, correct? So every first grade, starting with first grade, every first grade group of 25, say, would just go to this school, and then second grade, third.
So imagine it's all 7 schools and there's a lottery and whoever, you may have a smattering across, right? Yes, so they would be classed similarly to where currently your RESL students are
Okay.
that school. So it would be your host school.
So that building would be assigned, well, or at least a part of that building would be assigned for just this immersion program.
All right, yes, and the idea would be we would want it housed in one building.
Okay.
What our complications that we want to say up front is we see it first year, second year, up to at least 3 years being able to be at one particular school. We would have to work that out to make sure that we would be able to house that in the one school.
Okay. So then they would not be with their peers any longer?
Not until they got to middle school,
Correct.
unless they were from the host school.
Okay, and one last question, just on the numbers, Christine. These numbers for the teachers, now, does this include the benefits package along with this, or is this just the salary?
That will be, at the end, it's with the benefit package. At the end, I'll give you the summary of all the teachers. So it's
Yeah.
2, 2, and 2. So it's 2 librarian, 2 STEM, 2 world language, and then the costs on the last
So all the
page.
costs are...
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And then the immersion cost wouldn't be until 2019-20.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Oops.
Okay.
All right, so on page 28, a focus group, health and PE as a special. We had a group who did the research on there. Deb, did you want to do this one? You want me to? Okay, all right, that's fine. So we looked at the value of health curriculum and the mandate by the state, and again, really what we looked at, our concern was who was teaching it. And this was a tough one. This was a tough one. We went back and forth, a lot of different ways to figure out how can we have the teachers who should be teaching this, the health and PE teachers, teach everyone and not just, first, second, and third graders. And this is what the recommendation was, and as Mr. Smith already explained that, so it would be 13 health classes per year. And the teacher who's certified to be teaching that would be teaching that to all of our students, and we believe that that is the best recommendation for students. There's no staffing implications with this. This would just be a remodel of what we're doing. Mrs. Yardley, should I move on to second grade swim, or do you want me
Yeah, that's fine, because that's still part of this same focus group.
to? It is. So that same focus group looked at second grade swim. So we looked at the advantages, exposure to students who might not have an opportunity to learn to swim. It's a good use of the district facilities. It teaches young students swimming safety. And then disadvantages, there's issues with pool scheduling for the high school. Transportation costs are about $15,000 a year. There's been issues with volunteers and clearances. I don't know if Mr. Smith or Ms. Brady, do you want to add anything? I know that this was something that was a passionate discussion, and I think that having a building principal talk to you about what it actually is like in the elementary school would be a benefit.
Thank you. So swimming is great. We love it. I've been around forever, it feels like. So we used to do swimming years ago, and then that stopped because of getting kids to, I believe it was the local Y that we used to take them to. We stopped that when the pool was put in. We started it again. It is a great program for some students that don't have any other opportunity. What we face as building principals is an issue with scheduling, because normally a phys ed class might be from 2:35 to 3:20. But when you have swimming, they have to leave at 2, which means for every day of the year that you have a second grade at the end of the day, so 3 days out of the school year for my building, if I have 4 sections, it's 4 days out of the year, I have to make sure that there's enough cushion in there that I can move my special ed teacher's schedule up so that 2 o'clock on those days she can leave, which means I can't use her fully for other things, because for 7 weeks out of the year, her entire schedule gets changed. So you have that problem with trying to schedule and making good time. When you get out early because of snow, which we had once this year, we had to redo the entire plan. Because the swimming, what happens is then you get out early, and now even though it's still a day 4 in the cycle, the problem is that they can't get to swimming because you're out of school early. So then you're scrambling and looking around and trying to figure out how that fits in. If there's a snow day, you have Amanda tries to work with transportation. Sometimes the buses don't get there because they haven't gotten, the wires have been crossed. And then the biggest thing that we've hit lately is clearances for volunteers. When we first started, we had a ton of parents who were willing to come out and help out, which, although you're thinking why, might be thinking why, now you have 7-year-olds going into a locker room, changing, using bathrooms, maybe wanting to walk a little bit too fast for their own safety. So we tried to get parents in there to help out, because the high school teachers who were there, they're finishing up classes. We had one health and PE teacher who's going over, who also has to get changed to help out. So what we found was, in the beginning, it was great. You had parents, they'd go over. As they needed clearances, and as our world has changed and more people have had to get jobs, it's harder and harder and harder. So there are some times when you have no volunteers whatsoever. So you have your health and PE teacher trying to hurry up and get changed so that they can go in and help out and help the students get changed. So it just presents a wide variety of challenges that seem to be more and more, not to use the same word again, but challenging as we go on. So we looked at this. Do you want me to continue? Sure. All right, so we looked at this, and we didn't want our children not to have exposure to swimming, but the other thing that we were coming up with is, if you have teachers sick at the high school, you may not have anybody to cover. So then we're calling the middle schools and saying, hey, do you mind staying? Can you do that? So one of the things that we thought we could do was, initially we thought, well, maybe we could have it held on a Saturday, and then we could have free admission for second graders on a Saturday and use some of our high school swim people. And we found out that wasn't feasible. They just couldn't do the staffing with everything else that they have going on. So I believe it's Quakertown and possibly Central Bucks that have programs where they have gotten together with the YMCA and they have offered those programs for parents. So we're hoping that we could look at something like that. Like you said, it's not that we don't love the program, it's just that at this point it's become very much of a challenge to try to get the program to work within the constraints of our school day. You also then have an issue with busing. If the kids aren't out right away, the bus drivers are pressured because they have to get to their runs. If they drop the kids off, we've had times that I'm literally less than 2 miles away in my school. If the kids aren't back on time, now you're holding up all the buses because, little Susie couldn't get dressed fast enough, or there was an accident and she had to get changed again or something like that, which, it's a lot of pressure on the kids to get out on time, then it's pressure to get the buses back, then we have to get all those kids down to their classrooms, even though they're packed up. We don't want to start dismissing, or else now we have kids missing buses, so. Any questions about that?
You said here that Menlo offers 1 week of free swim lessons?
That was something Mrs. Walters was going to look into, so I'll defer to Lisa.
That is actually a program that Menlo Pool offers currently. It's called Everybody Swims. A lot of people don't take advantage of it, and those that do often sign up, but don't show up then for their swim lessons. So other people then can't sign up because the class is full, but here's somebody that doesn't show up. So that's something, I have connections with the Percy Parks and Rec, that the Park Director, Megan, is going to look into how we can sort of fine tune a little bit more, so if first people entering second grade take advantage of it, it's a little bit smoother of transition. But that is something as a possibility if we remove this from the school day for second grade, that they have something local that they can get swimming.
Do you need a membership? No?
I do have an email from Megan that outlines everything, so I can get you the answer to that.
Yeah, that may be cost prohibitive
So,
for a lot of
If
parents.
they need a membership, but then we also have Holiday House.
We have
pools
Holiday
that
House too.
You know somebody that.
I do
is
know
on the
somebody on
restaurant
there.
Supervisor, right?
Yeah, I could actually check that out too. Yeah, I know when my kids were little, kids could come in, pay for lessons, they were very inexpensive, but you did not have to be a member. So I can check at that end as well. And this is, okay, like all summer? I mean, what are we, well, I'll talk to Lisa.
Thank you, and thanks to everyone. I want to let you know that I spoke to the YMCA because they have the program, the Central Bucks, I spoke with them. And the way it works is students go to the pool. At Central Bucks, they use their own pools, one at the middle school, one at the high school. Second graders come in, they have a swim test. If you don't pass the test, then you're offered the free lessons. So I spoke to both. I spoke to Quakertown YMCA and the CB. Quakertown YMCA is interested in the program, they're not ready, and suggests that we start it with Central Bucks Y and that they would work with us in the future. So I am working with the Y in Central Bucks. They would want to use our pool for the tests to see how many students they would need then to offer the lessons to, and they would be free, and it's through a grant through the state, so it is of no cost.
Are the lessons just a certain amount of time? You get 2 months of lessons, or is it until you pass a test, or throughout the year?
It's actually a curriculum they have, I can't remember the exact number of weeks, but it's so many weeks, and they teach them the skills. So it's not, continuous, just to have the lessons, it's to make sure that they can get to the side of the pool to save themselves. I mean, obviously, this is just to make sure that we don't lose any of our students through drowning, or any child, really. So it is a number of weeks.
So these, if we did like one of the Ys, would the parents be bringing the children to the Y? Yes?
Yes, it
And that's
would
in
be.
Doylestown? Is it?
I think it is in Doylestown. We'd like to work with Quakertown, they're just not ready yet. So these are options. What we wanted to make sure that we impressed upon everybody was that we didn't want to just not offer swimming some way, somehow? What are other ways that we can offer for parents that they could bring second graders to make sure that they can swim? So we don't have a final answer, but these are possible solutions. You know, there's impact at the high school with the second graders coming too. There's impact with high school students and using the pool as well. So it's complications at the elementary level as complications at the high school level.
Yeah, and also just the whole community, I mean, the high school practices that wait an hour before they start, hour and 15, they can't get into the pool till 3:30. But then it pushes back our evening swim lessons, which are later, and then the aquatic club that also swims, it has kids swimming who age like 5 up to 18, so
I think
it does
has,
make them all
you know,
later.
I think it could bring relief to the high school, to the pool usage, so,
Right, well, that too,
That's
also to
That's
give
a
it a
good point.
breather,
Yeah,
yes.
I was going to bring that up because that was a topic last year as it relates to the pool usage and the pool needing time to recover and for the chlorine levels to return. So, yeah, it could help in that regard as well.
All right, let's move on to the last.
So library curriculum we already talked about, but that was a group that met. Okay, so let me go back really quickly. There were two other groups. We had group 7 and group 8. We had a group look at gifted, the PQR from the IU. So we did, and I just wanted to make sure that I told everybody that we had a group who worked on that. So Joan Coleza worked with several people on the gifted focus group. We've made a decision to make sure that it's a K-12 perspective, and now that we do have a new director for pupil services, I've kind of handed that off to her so she can look at the K-5 recommendations, work with the 6 to 12, and have a K-12 they certainly can come through the curriculum office the curriculum meeting and make recommendations collectively. We also had a focus group for special education, but that became very complicated, which also should go through pupil services, and now that we have a director, in all fairness to her, those recommendations should come from that office. So I just wanted to let you know that we did have two other groups, but we're not prepared to make recommendations. So in summary, it would be phase-in. We would hire 2 librarians to provide a full-time librarian at all 7 schools at 163. Obviously, the numbers are going to be the same because it's 2 teachers for STEM, 2 librarians, 2 teachers for world language. Then we added the STEM cost and the Spanish textbook cost. And then below that, you'll see a year or 2, so you would start with the one teacher. So they're the total costs for everything that we looked at. And we appreciate your time. We were enthusiastic. We think that all of this offers tremendous opportunity for our students, and we thank you for listening to us tonight.
I have a question about cost. So if the second grade swimming is taken out, there was $15,000 in busing. Were there any other costs associated with people working at the high school coming in? Weren't there some other people teaching in addition to the elementary school?
I did check at the high school in terms of costing implications and funds, and was told that there wouldn't be any.
There wouldn't be any?
No.
Okay.
So the cost savings is really the $15,000 for transportation.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, and so what would we, do we need to move this to personnel? I mean, what do we need to do next to?
I believe the discussions that I've had with Dr. Price, Dr. Radigan, and Mrs. McHale, that we would move the personnel request to the personnel committee, and we would be able to vote on the Spanish textbooks and the STEM program costs through curriculum committee.
Okay,
Okay?
all right. Any other questions? Do you have a question, Mrs. Coleman?
So this board is,
Can you put your microphone on?
I just wanted to clarify, so the exploratory Spanish is the special, so that we would be voting on tonight then, or no?
Well, we're not voting on anything tonight. We would decide if we want to move well, we've already discussed the librarians and said, right, that we would support that and move that to the personnel discussion. So really, it would be the STEM teachers and the Spanish teachers for as a special, Spanish as a special, those 4 teachers, moving them to say, we're supporting it and moving it to the personnel discussion where we could see if, where, and then make it as a budgetary decision. Does that make sense? And as far as and then you're saying, and we would vote on the textbooks and the program costs at the next board meeting or the following board meeting? I mean, I guess, would it make more sense to wait until after we had the personnel discussion?
Yes, that's what I was just thinking. I mean, if it's approved through personnel, we could add it onto the curriculum.
Right, because unlike the library proposal where you said even if the library needs weren't contingent on getting the personnel approved, they still needed the curriculum rewrite and the laptops.
Correct.
Right, whereas
Yes.
this, we would not need the textbooks or anything if the personnel were not approved. So we would wait on that. And then what would we do as far as the immersion program? Would we need to vote to move that forward, or?
I'm not sure how that would work in terms of budget. We would like to have a vote this year, but for implementation for 2019-20. I don't know how that would work with Mr. Dahlberg and budgets.
Is there something that we can, Mr. Kraus and Mrs. Walters, is there something that you want to share with everybody or something we can help with?
I'm sorry, I was just asking if the costs reflected here were for 2, or was that each, is that 2, and is that fully burdened?
It's 2. For one, it's 81,000. These are the numbers that we use from the business office, so times 2 is 163 with benefits.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That was the discussion.
All right. Go ahead, Dr. Eno.
I think the board has just begun discussing the budget, so there are a lot of missing pieces still. The next discussion is next week on the 14th, and there are then the following discussions in both April and May before the May preliminary proposed budget is passed, hopefully. I believe that date is something like May 14th. I don't remember exactly, but it's in mid-May, so that there then are the 30 days that are required to pass the final, before the final budget can be passed toward the end of June. But I would think by the time we got to the proposed preliminary budget in mid-May, we'd have a good idea of what the board is willing to incorporate in terms of personnel additions, for instance, versus trying to do that now, when we don't have any of the other pieces. Basically, we have really a 30,000-foot view of the budget is all we have so far. So that would be my suggestion, that by the time we get to mid-May, we should have a much better feel for what's in the budget and what we don't feel we can afford this year, if there are things like that.
Right, so we don't need to take any action, we would just discuss it as it came up in the personnel budget, and then there wouldn't be any, if we voted on the budget and that was in there, then there wouldn't be any other vote needed aside from approving then the materials that we need.
What about the, oh, go ahead. I just have to say, I'm struggling with this $500,000. And we're, again, we're about to renew a contract, and we don't know what those costs are going to be. I'm really struggling with, I'm sorry, but I'm having a hard time with $500,000 in personnel. It's never, like Dr. Yarnell always says, it's never just a one year. It's a 30-year commitment for personnel, 30 to 35 years. So anyway, I think we're going to have to see other reductions somewhere else. I'm sorry, for right now, unless things change with our budget discussions.
I mean, I would agree. It's a lot of money. It's $500,000 yeah. So, but I think that in past years, departments have gone through and made cuts, and so that would be something that I would be looking for as well. Like if you could go through and just be mindful that if we want to add this, the STEM was only $330,000 or $350,000, right? So this is even bigger, and it is something that I'm excited about. But I was looking at the number and thinking kind of the same thing. Like we might have to take a look at other areas where we could cut back maybe a little bit.
I understand you have to look at the whole picture. We don't know the staffing needs K to 12 yet. There could be a decrease in staffing, that this would be half of what you see here. I don't know that either. So I understand. I appreciate that.
I just have two quick follow-up things. One for the early intervention, or I'm sorry, not early intervention, the enrichment and remediation block. Would you be able to get kind of a big picture of what resources are available to each school? Because some are title schools, some aren't, some have, ESL and some don't. So the resources available for that period are very different from building to building, and I think it would be helpful to have a clear picture of what those resources are for supporting that, so that we can see if all of the schools have what they need to do that. Do you know what I mean? So is that something that you could get? That was my first question. My second question is, would you consider the one grade of immersion? Because I really love that idea.
We certainly will consider whatever the board asks us to consider. And in terms of resources, there are common resources across all 7 schools. And you're right, for title schools, those resources are different. They have different monies that are attributed to those buildings, and they can purchase different materials for those students because it's based on need. If you'd like a list of common resources and ones that are only used in title buildings, I certainly can do that.
Well, I just mean how many hands are available to push in? Do you know what I mean, for these things and provide support? Because that's different from building to building. So just if you could kind of do that by school, that would be helpful.
So you're asking for staff, right? You want to know about teaching assistants. And you're certainly going to have that different in terms of special ed classes as well. So yes, I can do that.
All right, so I think what I'm hearing, these suggestions will be incorporated into the budget presentations. Is that what I'm hearing from everybody? And then we'll have discussion as far as that goes. And, I guess we would have to have further discussion this year on the Spanish immersion, because if we want to do that for 2019, we'd have to make that decision this spring in order to go
Yes.
forward.
Yes, we would, because there's a lot of planning involved with that. So yes, thank you.
So I guess once we have some more budget discussions and can see where the first things are going, then we can bring up the Spanish immersion again at another curriculum meeting and see, and that way if people have more questions and if there's any more information.
Okay,
Okay.
we can do that. Thank you.
Because that would have no budget implications for the budget that we're working on, but it would for the following year. So we'd have to be willing to make that commitment. But I think we'd be able to better make that decision once we see where this budget is. So at least, as a first step.
Okay.
So,
Is it all or none? Like if we chose 2 things and not one, would that mess up the schedule that you created? So like if we just chose, say, the librarians and the world language, but not the STEM, or any combination of, could we do 2 of them without
We'd have to
doing?
rework that
Right.
model, yes.
Okay.
But we'd have to hire more.
Right. Well, right, because if you still wanted to have STEM or world language just as the semester course, you need something opposite that,
Yeah. Okay.
right? And if you ran it for the whole year, staffing stays the same.
I mean, I want it all.
I know. It's really exciting. I know it's really difficult, especially as board members. I mean, you have that obligation, certainly with budgetary constraints. We're all excited about it, so we certainly appreciate that you listen to that, and in the grand scheme of things, and with the entire budget, and we look at it, and hopefully there's some way that we can at least start the process. Thank you.
thank you for all of this, and thank you to everyone on the committee for all of your work. It's really amazing how much you put together in such a short time. So, and really, really exciting proposals. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for all of your work. Thank you for coming out tonight. And hopefully we will, can find a way to make it all work. Because it really is exciting and will be fabulous for our students.
Thanks, everybody.
So,
Thank you.
all right, we are moving on. We have one more presentation.
You don't have students.
Looks like a short agenda.
Yeah. Is that going? Good. Okay.
This one's only 22 slots. So.
Ready?